This is my kind of music, guys. This is what I listen to.
Well, you fist pump?
Time. Yeah,
Sweet.
try to do that. Welcome to Rankings Reaction presented by Allstate. Christine Williamson, Skubie Mageza, Dalen Cuff in the building. Talking a little rankings because, of course, they just came out for week 2. You guys doing good? How are we doing? How are you feeling?
Not
Excellent.
much change.
It's a Tuesday.
I love your shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Hey,
It's phenomenal. Do we see MJ in
Where did you get? Where did you get
what
that
is this,
from?
velvet? God, it's beautiful.
It looks like a rug
Hey,
or a blanket.
ugly sweater. 'Tis the season.
It's not ugly. It's covered in MJ. It's a thing of beauty.
No,
It's ugly sweater
didn't
vibes,
say
but
it.
it is beautiful. Thank
love
you. I
it.
appreciate the compliments, good
there.
sir.
Yeah,
I didn't say
come
it
on
was
now,
ugly. I just said it looks like a blanket.
You still have yet to compliment my shirt.
It's a blanket-looking shirt. Not
This has gone well. This has gone real well. Thank you. All right.
Bad shirt, but it looks like a blanket. It looks like whoever made that got a blanket and put it together, which is a possibility.
Yes, you're right. Rankings.
Okay, friends, as I mentioned, obviously the top 25 CFP rankings came out for week 2. So let's take a look at the rankings. Starting with number 25, we're gonna start at the bottom and go up. Kansas State there. Now, North Carolina hopped into the picture.
Kansas State tried hard to lose that game, by the way, against Texas. Like that, they have to be still in pain of losing that game.
They should have won the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should have. We'll talk a little bit more about Texas later.
Yeah, I know you're excited. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so Kansas State's there. North Carolina wasn't there last week. Now we move up even more. Notre Dame dropping 5. LSU dropping 5. Oklahoma dropping 8.
Deserves it.
I mean, it's a rivalry game.
How many times did I say Bedlam on the show last week? Over under how many Bedlam mentions?
But I feel like when
Plus
it comes
6.5
to
too, Christine.
rivalries,
Plus 6.5.
when it
That's
comes
good.
to rivalries, whatever. Anyways, so that's what happens with 16 through 20.
I agree.
OSU went up 8 after that dub against
Deserved it.
Oklahoma, which, deserved. What else do you guys think stands out here?
Galloway said it. Tennessee, you get to move up 4 spots after beating UConn. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's odd.
Louisville continues to inch up despite their lack. When you talk about resume, and we'll get into all that other stuff. They're 11, and they control their own path to ruining Florida State's
Their own
situation.
opportunity.
That's the only thing that they can do is ruin Florida State situation.
There's no way they can get in the top
Yeah,
4,
they're
but
not
the
gonna
fact
be,
that they're
right.
still at 11 is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now we're into the top 10. Penn State up 1, Ole Miss up 1, Bama and Texas still remains the same. Any surprise here?
No, not really. But Ole Miss is a very interesting team as they get to control their own opportunity. We heard the Dinich talk about it. If they're able to win out and beat Georgia, there has not been a team that has won against a top 3 ranked team not making it into the playoffs.
With one loss. Yeah,
Did
with
you
one
say
loss.
control your own opportunity?
Yeah.
He said it a second
He
time.
said it so
he's on.
casually, like that's how you
Well, he said
actually
it
say
2 minutes ago. He looked at me like, yo, bro.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that first
Shout out
time.
to
I
you.
didn't
You
hear
heard
that
me
first
on
time.
show with you.
I think you were worried on a blanket or something. Your head was in a different space.
Okay, now let's look at the top 6. This is what everybody is concerned about, and guess what, guys? Nothing happened at the top 6, which, I mean, I feel like we're not surprised by. I know that the committee says that they look at it week to week, right? So I would think that because you're looking at it week to week and you're scratching the rankings from week 1 and you're only looking at that week, that there could be some movement here, but is anybody surprised that it's the exact same?
Precedent matters. They can say it's week to week, but precedent, they set the precedent last week. And it's not that nothing happened, nothing changed, because Georgia did beat Missouri, and that's a solid win. Ohio State did not look particularly good against a Rutgers team, but they won the game. Everybody did. Florida State's losing some key guys. They had a tougher game than expected against Pitt. They won the game. So as long as everybody held serve, essentially. And when you do that, and there aren't any huge games like they are this week coming up, that can really shake this thing up, it's not surprising. But with Penn State playing Michigan and Utah playing Washington, like you have some big games. Ole Miss, you already mentioned Georgia. Those 3 games alone on the docket could switch this whole thing.
It's not surprising, but I anticipated Georgia to overtake Ohio State for that top spot.
Yeah.
Because with the way that Georgia's been playing, without Brock Bowers, that offense has been operating better. Because when you miss your best player, you all of a sudden start spreading the ball around, and Carson Beck has been playing phenomenal. The majority of the season, you lose your best player and you start to improve the way that the offense plays. So seeing Ohio State down 9-7 at halftime and then end up winning that game barely. Honestly, the score didn't look the way that.
For those of us that had them in a parlay, I was pretty unhappy. I was like, "Hey, this is supposed to be a blowout. I'm not supposed to be watching this game right now."
Yeah, exactly. So Ohio State, they did not play to their potential this week. Georgia had a tough matchup, and we've always talked about them not playing anybody. They played somebody this week, and they got a huge win against Missouri.
So initial thoughts when it comes to the rankings?
I'm not really surprised. I think the only point of contention was do they value Georgia's win over Ohio State not looking their best? And as Boo Corrigan went through, you're going to have the parsing of resume versus eye test, and it is a mix of both. You can't have it one way or the other. And bear in mind, they got a tough job. And this committee has to always explain themselves. And they come out there every week, and Boo sits there with Reese and explains it. And you're inherently going to contradict yourself one week to the next. You're trying not to, but when you do this for the next 6 weeks or 4 weeks after this, you're going at some point there's a pressure point that you're going to contradict yourself. You try not to, and in the end, their job is not to put certain conferences in or certain teams. It's the 4 best teams. That's their charge. Yeah. And but leading up to that, we talk about all the other stuff, but that's the goal at the end. Yeah. And that's where we hopefully in early December, that's hopefully get to that point.
Yeah, Texas was definitely one of the biggest winners from this weekend, especially with Alabama getting that win, because now it just solidifies Texas's win over Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Now you see Texas and the competition in the Big 12. Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma in Bedlam. Shout out to in Bedlam. So now that you see OklahomaTate step up, and I just want to give
foreseeable future.
Yeah, right.
Don't be over dramatic.
You got to give a shout out to Ollie Gordon. He has been one of the most interesting stories in all of college football. The guy had 19 carries the first 3 games of the season. And then all of a sudden, Ollie Gordon comes alive and leads this team towards victory. There's a lot of interesting things that you can look at with this team. And we got Ohio State up here. But shout out to Ollie Gordon, 33 carries, 137 yards. He had 100 yards after contact. One of the only players to do that in the last 6 years.
Yeah, and just on that real quick, because we keep joking about the Bedlam piece of it. Texas does have their obvious path now, but Oklahoma State is in the driver's seat to be in that Big 12 championship game. They have a tiebreaker over everybody, and Ollie Gordon's outstanding. That's not the greatest matchup for Texas. Yeah. But let's stop skipping by and just grandfathering Texas into winning all these games, including on the road at Iowa State. They could lose again. They don't have the institutional knowledge, or they've not earned the trust for the last 10 or 15 years where we just say they win. We just say Alabama won the rest. We just say up until this game with Georgia's going to win all these games until they get to X point. Teams have earned that. Texas has not earned that yet.
You don't think when Texas says Texas is back that they're actually back?
Texas has been saying they're back since I was 12, Christine. That's a long time ago.
Well, I wasn't alive then.
Texas is going to be their game against Iowa State. I think they'll be in trouble. That's one game we talked about that people are just writing off as if Texas is going to win.
It was Kansas State at home, and they should have lost the game.
That's very true. But I will say, if Texas does in fact win out, then they do have a really good path into the CFP, especially if Alabama ends up beating Georgia in the SEC championship. So it'll be a very interesting thing.
Just real quick on that, because they still do need a team to lose, one of the undefeated teams. But I do think the thing that hurts them is if Oklahoma would have run the table, and Oklahoma's one of the undefeateds, and you get to play them, and your win looks so much better and different, and you are obviously taking somebody off of the ranks of undefeated. That equation may be different. That's long gone now, but I do think you would have. In an ideal scenario, that might have played out for Oklahoma, in all honesty. But now, or for Texas, in all honesty.
But they'll still be a Power 5 champ if they win. And, of course, some other things have to happen. Let's talk about some of the Week 10 storylines that we're paying attention to. Washington beat USC. Did you guys see this coming? Alex Grinch gets fired. The defense looks awful, as it has all season.
Go ahead.
So the thing about Washington for me that I've seen over and over this season is that they have failed to run the ball. They had 13 yards rushing against Arizona State earlier this season. And then all of a sudden, Dylan Johnson comes out of nowhere, has a monster of a game, and this offensive line bullied USC. Now, we know it's USC. Their offense has struggled all season. And then I talked about it last week. Michael Penix Jr. had the flu, and now he looks better. You see the throws that he's making on the screen right now. But to have your offensive line bully USC the way that they did is something that you have to love as a Washington fan, because 199 of his 255 yards rushing were before contact.
Exactly.
And that is absolutely ridiculous.
He averaged 9.8 yards a carry. That's a first down every time he touched the ball almost. It was absurd. Now, you said, did you see this coming? Some of us are idiots and took the 3 points and hoped USC could have found a way at home. I was just like, can we make this happen? And it didn't happen for your boy. The rest of the parlay was great, but that didn't work out at the end. Long story short, though, that team, yes, they're not the team we thought they would be in terms of their results. Defensively, we knew there'd be issues from the very first game. They've progressively gotten worse, and you have to let the DC go at this time. And DC go at this time because they're not responding to him. but they just did get punked. The problem is Utah usually does the punking. So in this game this week, who controls the trenches on both sides of the ball will be critical. I don't think Utah can score to keep up with Washington, especially Washington playing at home. And they did their offense looked like it did 3 weeks ago. They went through a couple weeks where they wobbled. They looked back to normal. I don't know if that's a product of how bad USC is defensively or everybody being healthy, but it helps you with confidence. And if they can win the trenches, I do think they win that game and control their opportunity moving forward.
Love that for them. Control your opportunity. Okay, that's the Pac-12. Let's talk a little bit about the SEC because Alabama typically runs the table. It hasn't been happening this season necessarily in the same way that it has in the past. However, they did have a complete win over LSU this past weekend. Jalen Milroe was a bucket. 4 rushing touchdowns. It's a school record, by the way, just so you guys know. So what did you see out of Alabama this weekend, and what do you think that means moving forward?
The way that they were able to utilize the QB run is something that they haven't done all season. And Jalen Milroe seemed to have gotten more comfortable using his legs in the passing game. Now, the thing that separates great players from okay players is when a team takes away your strength. What is going to be your answer for that? Jalen Milroe's strength all season has been throwing the deep ball, and he hasn't been able to capitalize that in this game against LSU because LSU took that away. So what did he do? He was able to hit the intermediate throws. He was able to use his legs. There was one run in the first half where he straight up trucked dude and had his legs over his head like a wheelbarrow. It was a phenomenal game for Jalen Milroe, and they were playing that game like it was the Super Bowl. They keep playing like that, they'll be you and no. Maybe, Christine, you picked up what I'm putting down. That's for all my dogs right there. You feel me?
I'm over here like, what? All right, anyway, we're just going to move on again. She picked up what you're putting down.
You feel me? A little Drizzy Drake.
They're the headlights right there. Yeah. All right. I feel like I listen to his songs 50 times a day, but I missed that.
Wow.
I'm slow. In terms of their, like Alabama, what they did well, Milroe was great. And I think Tommy Rees figuring out, okay, how am I going to use him differently? How am I going to accentuate what he does well? Because obviously it was a struggle. That USF game was almost unwatchable.
Yeah.
That was only a month ago. It feels like a different team and a different season. That said, defensively, that's where the game changed. It was 21-all at the break, and LSU was scoring kind of at will, and Bama was responding. But you have to be able to contain Jaden Daniels. You have to be able to change things up. And defensively, they were much better in the second half. They made it harder for Daniels, and that's where I think they won the game. Milroe was great, and that is going to help them going long term. But that defense showed up in the second half, and ultimately that's the game. You have to play complementary football.
Do you think Jalen Milroe is a quarterback that can win you the national championship?
Well, the funny thing about that is Stetson Bennett was a quarterback that could win the national championship. Not once, but twice.
That's true.
Again, and obviously Nick Saban has had quarterbacks that are subpar win national championships in the last 10 or 15 years. This is not abnormal for Alabama. I think he's got a lot of raw talent. Yeah. He's got a lot of mistakes in him. But if they start to continue to accentuate what he actually does well and can build out a system around that better,
100%.
Then you're in a better situation.
100%.
Okay, let's bring in Heather Dinich to the conversation because obviously Heather knows way more than we do when it comes to the CFP rankings. Okay, Heather, so we've been talking about a lot so far in the show. One of the things that I find most interesting with this rankings is Texas at number 7 there. And Reese Davis thinks that Texas really controls their opportunity as they move forward and has a huge shot to get into the CFP by the end of the season, depending on what happens above them. When you see that Texas team there, what do you think about their chances?
I think that the head-to-head against Alabama is going to continue to impact the top 4 through Selection Day. Because this is what happens. This is why I try to tell people when it's week 2, these games matter. They will continue to matter. And this is exactly why. Now, Texas should not lose again. They should finished as one-loss Big 12 champ, assuming that they win the title. They shouldn't lose again in the regular season. So I don't see the committee not honoring that head-to-head all the way through Selection Day. So to me, if Alabama wins the SEC, that's even better for Texas because then Texas has a double-digit road win against the SEC champs. So you put Texas and Alabama in. But what happens above them? Well, Ohio State and Michigan obviously have to play each other. Michigan has to play Penn State on Saturday. There's going to be some more chaos. This is definitely going to change. The question is there room for Texas and Alabama? I mean, I can't see them leaving the SEC champ out if Alabama wins. So I think that's where it gets interesting. Who's the victim of the on the bubble, right? Is it the Pac-12? Well, not if Washington's undefeated. Is it Florida State? It gets tricky, guys.
Yeah, it sounds like head-to-head really does matter, just from what you went over there. Now, Heather, right before you got on, I said I wouldn't have been surprised if I saw Georgia go over Ohio State. Why do you think Ohio State was still able to hold off the Bulldogs even after their big win against Missouri?
This was a 50-50 shot here, guys. It could have gone either way, but I think the resume continues to separate Ohio State from Georgia. And when you look at Notre Dame and Penn State now at number 10, they're still top 20 wins, which is the best of any of the undefeated teams. And even though Notre Dame lost to a 4-loss Clemson team, now has 3 losses, that's still better than the totality of Georgia's resume, because the Bulldogs just got their first statement win, their first win against a top 25 team. And if you watch both of those games, which I did, they actually played out pretty similarly in that they were both trailing. They both needed their defense to help them out in the second half. And both of them had opponents that took hits. You know, we talked about Notre Dame. Well, Florida lost. Now they're a 4-loss team. That was one of Georgia's better wins. So at the end of the day, there just wasn't enough to justify the flip.
Heather, let's spin that forward then, though, because Ole Miss is number 9 in the rankings, and Georgia has them at home between the hedges this weekend. If they win, not throttle, let's say they beat Ole Miss, and Michigan State is who Ohio State plays, at what point does the resume conversation potentially flip in Georgia's favor? Could it be next week?
Certainly, yes. I mean, if it could be this week, it could certainly be next week. But I would also throw out there, what if Ole Miss beats Georgia and Georgia goes on to win the SEC? I mean, there are a lot of different scenarios that could unfold. And Peter Burns was actually the first person to put this in my brain on the radio last week at ESPN. He said, well, what if Ole Miss beats Georgia? And you know, it's it's really hard for a team that doesn't win its division or its conference title to finish in the top 4, because the committee has to agree that it is unequivocally one of the 4 best teams. I've been saying that for a decade now. But if Ole Miss is 11-1 with a win against the SEC champs, I mean, they are at least talking about the Rebels. Yeah. I promise.
So Greg McElroy on the show earlier said that he felt like there was a little bit of inconsistency when it came to the top 6 teams. He said, you know, some teams, obviously they're looking at resume. It seems like some, it's the eye test, some it's strength of schedule. There just seems like there's not as much consistency at the top. Do you agree with that?
Yes, 100%. Because if there was consistency and it was all about resume, as is justified by Ohio State at number 1, Michigan wouldn't be anywhere near the top 4. They entered this week 112th in strength of schedule with their best win against Rutgers. Like, what are we talking about here? So it's all eye test with Michigan. And I get it. You have to watch the games. You see what Michigan is doing, and I don't care who you're playing. They are just beating the snot out of people. They're number 1 in game control. J.J. McCarthy should be in the Heisman conversation. I talked to Penn State defensive coordinator Manny Diaz today about defending these guys on Saturday, and he told me that J.J. McCarthy stresses you out from the time he gets the ball to the time the whistle is blown, right? And his ability to make plays with his feet. That's a good football team. But no, it's not a consistent justification for why these teams are ranked the way they are. And to go back to your Skubie, said, the head-to-head matters. Yeah, unless you're Texas and Oklahoma. So it matters when it matters.
Yeah, that's very true.
Let's talk Florida State here, because I think their situation with the ACC is interesting. As North Carolina is 24 now, Louisville is 11. Outside of that, nobody else is ranked in the conference. When you look at Florida State, are they just at a mercy of everybody around them losing? Can they enhance their resume at all, or they just have to keep a donut and hope other teams lose around them?
They can enhance it if they face Louisville in the ACC championship game and finish as an undefeated ACC champ. I mean, the pressure is on Florida State to run the table, I think, because they don't play North Carolina, which snuck into the rankings at, I'm looking down at my list, number 24. So the only other opportunity would be in the ACC championship game. And they can certainly do that. I don't think Florida State should lose any of those next 3 games. Miami's a great Rattler game. I talked to Mike Norvell about that this week. But North Alabama at Florida, which just lost to Arkansas, if by chance Florida State stubs its toe in any one of those things, I think they're in big trouble.
Very interesting stuff, Heather. You said it on the College Football Playoff Rankings show. If you're sleeping on this rankings, wake up. It's about that time as we go into week 11. Thank you so much. Great talking to you, Heather.
Thanks, guys.
All right, let's take a look at the Allstate playoff prediction.
He goes down. This game is over.
He had a mouse in the house.
Makes a cut, spins, and he's into the end zone.
That dude is dead.
Hey, Odell, it's been a while.
Is that intercepted? Yes. The final bedlam's in the books. How about Jim Campbell? There is a passion and a wildness to these matchups.
If Clemson's a stock, you better buy all you freaking can buy right now.
Very demanding stretch run beginning tonight.
Dylan Johnson having a night you can dream about. Huskies got tested here, but they survived this.
We got two heavyweights here in Tuscaloosa tonight.
Pulls to his right and his fourth touchdown of the day. Roll Tide!
All right, let's take a look at the Allstate playoff predictor. Week 11 of the college football season is sure to give us plenty of answers, but maybe none as informative as Michigan's first true test of the season on the road against Penn State. Michigan has a couple of interesting scenarios here. If they win out, they win the Big Ten title game, 99%. If they lose to PSU, win Big Title game, there's 93%. Wins out, loses Big Ten title game, 76%. Loses to OSU, doesn't make the Big Ten title game, 37%. Now, prior to tonight's rankings, the 9-0 Wolverines currently have a 44% chance of making the playoff. A loss on the road to the Nittany Lions would definitely put on the pressure. However, if you look at Michigan's three remaining opponents, this is what it looks like. According to the Allstate playoff predictor, Michigan has a better chance of beating Ohio State than Penn State. So, knowing that, Dalen Cuff, what does that say about Penn State?
They're playing at home. I think that's the long and the short of that to me. That's when you look at how small that percentage change is. It's home field and college football and college sports, as we were talking about before, basketball too. It's a huge impact on outcomes of games in terms of how young people play, the refereeing, the experience, all of it. All that factors in. So I do think Penn State is good. Penn State's not the same team that Ohio State is, but when you play them at home, as Penn State is, gives you a better chance. In the big house, Ohio State, not the best situation for them.
That's true.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more at the end of the show, but Drew Aller is going to be a huge reason why Penn State is able to compete in this game. Just last week, he had his best game of the entire season, throwing for 240 yards and 4 touchdowns. We haven't seen Drew Aller necessarily be successful throwing the ball down the field. So not only that for the Penn State offense, their defense was shut down. Y'all want to know how many rushing yards Maryland had in this game? Negative 49.
I thought that was a mistake. Saw negative 40 during the game. I'm like, what? That can't be right, right?
Unreal. They're the lowest that they've had in school history. So the Penn State defense has been the strength of their team all year long. So when I look at Michigan and the type of competition that they've faced, it's going to be a little bit of a shocker when you go against this Penn State defense that can put the clamps down on you. You feel me, Christine?
Wow, that was intense. Okay, when you look at the CFP, we talk about Washington a little bit. Do you think that there's a chance, I don't know why I said Washington, do you think that there's a chance that there could be 2 Big Ten teams in the CFP by the end of the season?
I think it's all how that plays out. But there's a route to make that happen if they only lose to each other. Michigan has to beat Penn State as Ohio State did.
Right.
And then one of them loses the other. You need Florida State to lose to somebody to get knocked out an ACC team. You need a Pac-12 team, I think, to lose to an opponent that's not a quality opponent.
Right.
And then you have yourself a different situation. Obviously, if Georgia falls too, the more one-loss teams you have, then you put all the cooks in the kitchen, and then you get into some resume, but you get into eye test. And then in Michigan, if they throttle a Penn State on the road, that's a really good win. And if you go and lose at home to Ohio State, that'd be shocking, but you can find a way to justify it. I don't think it'll end up happening. I think I have too much respect. I think the Pac-12 is good and should send a team. I think Florida State's not going to lose a game. I think the SEC is definitely going to get one in there. And your Texas argument does remain potent if they win out in a convincing fashion.
So someone in the chat called us Texas haters because apparently we're not putting into fact that they have lost their starting quarterback. So shout out to whoever was in the chat. You have a great point. Malik Murphy is not their starting quarterback, redshirt freshman. But back to your question, Christine, of the Big Ten getting 2 teams in, I don't think it's right. The more that I look at it, in terms of the best team getting in the playoffs, if they're all beating each other up, you're going to look at it and say, all right, Michigan, you faced your first real opponent in Penn State or Ohio State, and then you lose that game. So how are you...
Even if it's a close game?
But we're looking at it the other way around, because if Michigan wins both those games and Ohio State is the one loss, do we respect Ohio State's resume and what they put on wax more? Yeah. Because it's not just one. That's why I think that it's all about the permutations of who won, who lost, and who else lost. But I think your best bet is Ohio State being the one-loss team, not Michigan, given their resume.
That makes sense. Also, obviously, their higher ranking. Okay, fans, be sure to check out ESPN.com/Allstate Playoff Predictor to check out your team's chances of making the CFP.
This is what we train for. This is what we work for.
Put the world on notice who you are.
Get your mind right. Focus on this moment. We have for one purpose. I gotta have it. I need it. How about that? Touchdown! On top of the mountain. How about it?
And his 4th. That's what we praying for right here.
What an impressive win.
Now, the stakes get much higher.
Okay, here's a look at what games could really shake things up in Week 11. We talked a little bit about these earlier in the show. Michigan taking on Penn State, Utah taking on Washington, Tennessee versus Missouri, Ole Miss taking on Georgia, of course. They're all huge games. But we asked some questions to the YouTube chat, which I feel like you guys, first of all, we're not Texas haters, just FYI.
I feel like I was, unfortunately, maybe I took the wind out of your Texas sails.
Yeah, like,
he walked in with a flag earlier, guys. Texas is going in. Put him in right now. And I had to poo-poo it.
I literally put in the chat, or in our rundown, I said Texas is back. And I feel like every time I say that, I jinx it a little bit. So that's, if I happen to jinx
because
you guys,
you've been saying it for the last 15 years. Every year, you can't do it.
Listen, I haven't been saying it the last 15 years,
but
I have
the rest
said
of
it
the
a few
country
times. Okay. So we asked you guys some questions. The first question, does Ohio State have the best resume? 36% only say yes, which, interesting.
What I do think is, they asked this question at Boo Corrigan, it is hard to poo-poo a win that a month ago was a high-level win. Notre Dame was a top 10 team. LSU, by the way, they've lost 3 games. They've lost all teams in the top 10 of the current rankings. Like, that's not a bad
quality
thing.
Losses.
Those are, it is.
Yeah,
it's like,
those are quality
when
losses.
you look at the team, okay, I think LSU is better than Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But you still have to assess the team they're playing and when they played them and that they beat them. And then who else, how the rest of the season is going factors in. But you can't ignore where they were at that point in time when that game took place. Ohio State, relatively speaking, I think, that Penn State, the way they beat Penn State handily, and to beat Notre Dame in that fashion on the road, I think those are 2 of the better wins you're going to find right now.
I can understand the concern of everybody in the chat with Ohio State's offense, because that's kind of been up and down all season. But when you look at the numbers on paper, they do have the best resume.
Okay, so the second question that we asked you guys, is Michael Penix Jr. a lock for the Heisman? 44% only say absolutely. Any surprise there?
Put your money where your mouth is then, folks. If you're going to fire away at 44%, you may as well put that plus 140 action I think he's at right now. I do think there's other people, obviously, in the discussion. And Jaden Daniels losing it. The wins have to correlate. You don't have to win them all, but it helps to win more games and have your Heisman moments. J.J. McCarthy's going to be up there. He's got a huge weekend coming now. He's got Ohio State coming in. The windows and your performance, the windows of when you're playing and who you're playing against, the eyeballs all matter, and then how you perform in that stretch. And there are other guys that are still in the mix, but Penix is definitely going to be there today.
It's going to be interesting because RG3 did win the Heisman when Baylor only won 8 games that year.
There are years. I mean, Caleb last year, too. Obviously had a couple losses, too. But
So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes up. For anybody who wants to put their money where their mouth is, down, I don't think that's good value.
I agree.
I don't think that's good value. So if you're going to do that, you might want to look at somebody else.
Should have done it 6 weeks ago when he was like plus 500.
For sure. It's also November, and this is typically when people have their Heisman moments and kind of stake their claim on the Heisman. So we'll see what happens. We've only had one Saturday in November. There's plenty of football left to play. The third question that we asked you guys: can Carson Beck lead Georgia to its 3rd straight national title? 38% say, I think so.
That's just a rip-roaring
I think so.
confidence
So
there.
I don't know if that's, I don't think that's very confident. But I mean, you were saying earlier, obviously Stetson Bennett.
Yeah,
did this thing.
now Bennett, he went out and made plays at different times. I feel like the first year he was hitting a little bit more. The second year he went out and made plays when he had to win games, and it was impressive to say the least. Can Carson Beck do something similar? Yes, I think Brock Bowers, that we may talk about, is his health and maybe returning to this team critical to winning at the highest level.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you take away a key piece, everybody else, things change and get better and improve, and when you throw that piece back in there, it can make them even better.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Or it could mess things up a little bit, depending on how things go. What do you think, Scoob?
Carson Beck has been playing well all season. I don't think people realize how big he is. The dude is 6'4", 200-something pounds, and last week we saw him using his legs just the same way that Stetson Bennett did. So when he's running in the open field, I'll tell you what, it's not going to be easy to bring him down, and he's gotten better every single week. If Brock Bowers comes back, he's going to have a better quarterback throwing him the ball.
Which is very interesting, too, when you talk about Brock Bowers and Carson Beck and how big he is, because I feel like Stet looked like a regular guy.
Yeah, he was thin.
So, it's very interesting because it's definitely a different quarterback. Anyways, thanks for watching Rankings Reaction presented by Allstate. We'll be back next week, and it is going to be a big weekend on Saturday, so things should definitely shake up a little bit.
Maybe.
See you then.